There we go. There we go. Okay, and let me take a second to introduce Dr. Caitlin Walker from the UK. She is an expert in clean language and the use of it in helping people communicate better in almost every way you can think of. So we're going to look today at how clean language can be used as an antidote to microaggressions that happen in the workplace, just what that means and how we work through it. And I'm gonna turn it over to Caitlin and stop talking so she can take it from here.
Lovely. Thank you, Wayne. So normally the way I like to, I'm just going to take that slide down, Wayne, just because I can't see everybody. That's lovely. Thank you. Um, when I'm introducing clean, I usually like to start with a very open question, which is what would you like to know before we begin? Because my experience with it goes from, working with teenagers, long-term unemployed and the homeless, hospitals, schools, universities, high-end corporate board level, and also the positive of how do we create something fantastic together and the, oh my goodness, I'm going to bring the lawyers in. There's a massive fight. So I've got this huge range of experience that I use this work in, and it really, really helps me if you are demanding as an audience and say, hey, I'm really interested in this, or what I'd really like to know is how it works here. So what I thought I would do is I would give you just a very little bit of an overview, sort of for what are clean questions, what do I mean by micro connections and microaggressions, and and a tiny bit interactive as well. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to demonstrate what a clean question is. And after that, I'd really like to open it up to Q&A and discussion. That works so much better for me. I understand that some of you might be cooking or driving or you can't be online, and that's fine. But if you are, it would be great if you could just, shout into the space and say what it is you'd like to know. So, a clean question is simply the cleanness of a clean question. It doesn't mean that you're not swearing or using lewd language. It is simply that your question doesn't bias or aims to minimally bias the answer that you're going to get. So to ask a clean question is a state of genuine curiosity. And there are lots of reasons why we would be genuinely curious, and there's lots of reasons why we stop being curious. And the microaggression side of this, I'll talk about in a little minute. Or maybe I'll start there. Um, I was just talking to somebody today who said, oh, the issue in my team is that when we've got new ideas, we keep them quiet or we only share them with our allies because if we bring them to the whole team, they get killed before they have a chance to grow. He said people ask questions, but they're not asking questions in order to grow the idea. They ask questions to put it down, to shame us, to demonstrate flaws that we haven't thought about yet, or to bring their own ideas and put them on top of them to take up our space. And so what he wanted was to teach the team some questions that don't do that. So unclean questions, questions which have bias, are often have a little bit of drama in them. So I'm using Cartman's term of drama, like either you're not okay, you're persecutor, you're not okay, your idea's not okay, you're not good enough. Do you not think that you could try that? You probably haven't thought about this. Have you thought about how this might damage that? And so you've got those sorts of questions. You've got the victim questions. That's fine for you, but what's that going to do to me? Or have you considered the damage that might do to me or my team? So there's these sort of, I'm not okay. If you do this, I'm not okay, that sneaks into the questions. And then you have the rescuing ones, which can sound really helpful, but and any of you are parents will know that from oh, when you write this story, have you thought about using this kind of language, which where you haven't been invited, nobody asks you to stick your big nose out? And rarely do those questions, does a child go, hey, thank you so much. I really wanted you to come in and disguise a question, when really you just want to tell me what I should do. So there's the rescuing. And with these questions which have a little smear of contempt in them, they create resistance and they create that really difficult to unravel thing that goes on at work where you're like, well, I was only asking a question. You go, well, you weren't, were you? Let's just settle down. Let's go back in. What were you actually doing? Let's look at the structure of that question. And one of the, I do say this as a warning, if you teach children or adults or teams clean questions, they will become more and more sensitized to your disguised little smear of contempt. So one of the mistakes I talk about in my book when I first taught this all to teenagers who wouldn't go to school was that they would go to school and the teachers would say, oh, you need to stop being so distracted. And the kid would say, hey, what are you seeing and hearing that you call distracted, miss? I said, well, you're looking out the window. Yeah, that, miss, when I'm concentrating, I need to look out of the window to concentrate. Well, unless the teachers have also been trained, they don't take this response from their kids as, nice, healthy, strong discussion. So similarly, if you teach this to your teams, they will challenge you in a different way to when they weren't sensitized to this kind of distinction between what's a genuinely clean question and a leading question. So a little warning, it's best if a few of you do it at once, and it's tricky if you're the only one who's doing it. Is that Umar saying I was given this as feedback?
Yes.
What happened, Umar? Oh, I'll
Uh,
catch him in.
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was a group exercise, and me being the agilist in the space, I was managing the group. So I was creating my mind map over here in the space that I normally do. And
Mm-hmm.
whoever the observer was thinking maybe I was just daydreaming.
Yeah.
So without asking me what I was doing there, they just gave me one liner saying, was always distracted, looking away from the screen.
And so that's a pure judgment. He's always distracted. I've seen some evidence and I've misinterpreted it. And then there's the ones where you go, oh, am I boring you? Or, oh, am I not interesting enough? Which sounds like a question, but it's all shaped by what you've already thought. So a clean question, and there's some absolutely super clean ones, which you can learn, but you learn them as training tools. You don't, if you're super clean in business, or with teenagers, you'll just sound like Yoda. It's just weird. So you learn clean questions, but we don't say always ask clean questions. Otherwise, it's just strange. But once you've learned them, then you can start to feel how far away a leading question is. So, for example, if I give you all an instruction to think, so just imagine that you're stuck. So think of somewhere in work or your life where you've become stuck. When you're stuck like what? And if you could just pop your answers into the chat. So when you're stuck like what? And then I'm going to demonstrate on your answers the difference between a clean question and a leading question.
Seeing them okay?
Yep.
Yep.
I'm just enjoying at the moment.
Yes.
So Nancy Wayne's and Gino's, just you've got there's one is a muddy field, one is my feet are in the mud, and then feet are in concrete. And even just those little differences in metaphors, like a muddy field, feet are stuck in mud, I cannot move forward, and feet are in concrete. So Roberts is stuck in a snare, and Blake is speechless in fog. Anne's is my mouth doesn't work. So just even notice the different embodiments. The where have you physicalized the terms stuck? Leanne is stuck like glue. Now, yeah, these are great. And then you've got Pascal, which is stuck, and there's a process. So, whereas we know Gino is stuck in concrete, can't go in any direction, Pascal is standing in a swamp and it might get worse. So there's also the process of the stuck. So clean questions are very simple. And to ask them, clean questions, in order to ask them, I have to pay attention to what you've said. So that means my attention has to leave my own system. So no matter how my stuck is, no matter where in my body it is or what my metaphor is, I have to abandon that for a moment and it stays with me and I have to attend to you. So in this moment, all of my sense of stuckness, my desire to get you out of it, my desire to give you words back or get your feet moving, all that stuff has to stay with me to ask a clean question. And I have to pay attention to you. So I could ask, oh, and you don't need to answer yet. I'm just going to do like, my mouth doesn't work. What kind of doesn't work? Or I'm stuck like glue, not going anywhere, blank. When you're stuck like glue, whereabouts is that glue? So that would give us Lien's, embodiment of it. Or Pascal, it's like standing in a swamp. When you're standing in the swamp, is there anything else about that swamp? Or Robert, I'm stuck in a snare. Does the snare have a size or a shape? So you can, all the clean questions, they have to accept what you've said just as you said it, and then asks a question around it. So it keeps you safe from whatever I'm making up about stuck. So the first thing is it creates a moment of safety. And because it's a proper question, so if I say, I don't know, and stuck like in a snare, what kind of snare? As you think about it, you have the freedom to update it. So because my question isn't going to take your content and bend it, it just sort of says, hey, expand your content a bit. You're also safe from what you think. You're like, oh, now that I think about it, it's like this. So you can update your thinking. So it creates this level of safety between us. And I use your words the way you've said them. So when I read Gino's, my feet are in concrete, I can say, oh, what kind of concrete? Or I can say, and there's no way out in any direction. And when there's no way out, then what happens? So in that moment, it's your experience, just as you're having it. Here's a little bit of a sense of belonging. Your words matter, and I trust you. I'm not going to change your experience. I'm not going to tell you something else. I'm not going to jump in and decide what needs to be done. You matter to me. And that sense of belonging is simply because I'm going to pay attention to you, accept and extend what you've said. And then because they constrain me, but they leave you free to answer, they also create freedom. And so there's something, this is what I call the micro connection. As I said, you don't need to ask very many of them, but simply one or two clean questions, it trains my attention to pay attention to you. And in the moment, it creates a bit of a sense of safety, belonging, or freedom simultaneously. So if I take any of those, let's take Nancy standing in a muddy field. So even just to hear Nancy's words, standing in a muddy field, to make sense of it, our brains, of a tenth of a second, we have to make sense of it in some way. If you're very visual, you have to visualize the field. You can't, I don't know why, because I'm not visual. I don't know why you guys have to do this, but those of you who do it, you make pictures straight away. It helps you make sense of the world. Or some of you are very kinesthetic and you start to feel it in your bodies. You imagine yourself in your body standing in this field. Those of you who are more digital, like myself, you just go, they're just words to me, standing in a muddy field. And I have a very vague sense that sometimes fields have shape. So, but we have to do something to make sense of it. So then we can ask questions. So I could say, so Nancy, when you're standing in a muddy field, what kind of muddy? I'm just going to get you ready. You can type it or you can speak it.
Yeah, I have a horse, so I was thinking of 6 inches of mud halfway up your calf.
Okay, so now
Exact.
as you're listening to Nancy, so you got it now? So it's 6 inches of mud halfway up your calf. Got it? So then we can also say it's not just the standing in mud, but it's a field. So Nancy, when it's a field, of a muddy field, is there anything else about the fact that it's the field?
Yes, they're often, I mean, they're not flat usually. There's a downhill or an uphill. You're usually fenced in. There are usually, well, in my fields, there are horses. So
yeah. So there's a downhill and there's
my thoughts. Like, it's not a place you want to really be stuck.
Yeah. So now you've got a little bit more information. So now we know a bit more about Nancy's. There's a downhill, there's an uphill, it's a field, and there's horses. It's not a place you want to be stuck. Let's take a different one. Anne, can I ask about your mouth? So when my mouth doesn't work, what kind of doesn't work?
The words don't tumble from my brain down my throat to my mouth.
So I'm just going to pause down there. So the other thing that you learn to have when you learn clean questions is you learn to have a structural ear. So what we now have is a functioning Anne's mouth. And when it's functioning, what do words do? They tumble. Where do they tumble from? They tumble down from my brain, out my mouth. And that is Anne when Anne's not doing whatever Anne is like when Anne's stuck. So then we can ask, so once you've got some real basics, you can ask cleanish questions, which would be more like, so when they don't tumble down from your brain into your mouth, or out of your mouth, where are the words?
They get stuck in the brain and they keep tumbling around.
So now we know what kind of stuck. So now they're tumbling around in the brain and they don't tumble out. So let's just go from that one to, who else had it? Oh, Blake. So Blake, you're speechless in fog. What kind of speechless?
Similar to, I think it was Anne, like things are tumbling. Actually, as she said that, I was like, oh, that is kind of how it feels. Like they get stuck in here and they don't do anything out there. So that was actually really cool.
So, and that's again what's lovely. When I very first started doing this work with teenagers, they started sharing their models for being at their worst, for losing their temper, models for being at their best, models for making decisions. And what they got was both new ideas from how other humans do it, as well as confirmation that actually it's perfectly normal. Do you know, and when there's enough of you, you go, ooh, yeah, that's interesting. And you're in the fog. What kind of fog, Blake?
The fog of, it's like, maybe it's like the words are kind of stuck around me like a fog and they're not going anywhere. Like the fog's not, the air isn't moving. It's just sort of like stuck around.
Mm-hmm. And then the where is there to go from here? So anything else about the where is there?
When I'm in a fog and there's like a lack of processing, like things get stuck in one part of the cycle, it's like I have no idea what the next step is. It feels so so unknown, you know.
Mm-hmm. So let's get one more with a cleanish question. Let's say, Gino, when feet are stuck in concrete and there's no way out in any direction, is there anything else about that concrete?
Well, it's all consuming actually. So it's the fact that that concrete is there and you can't move. You don't really pay attention to what's around you, and the only thing you can focus on is that concrete. You need to chip away at it.
Uh-huh. And then so you just listen to, if everyone could just listen to the different ways, because what he knows done there is bring me into, there's also the process questions. So we now know that before Anne's mouth doesn't work, before that, those words were tumbling out from that brain out of the mouth. And we know that for Hino, after he's stuck like that, what needs to happen? You need to chip away at the concrete. But we don't know what happened before. So we don't know where did the concrete come from or what happened just before you were stuck. So we don't know what happened just before Robert was stuck, like in a snare. We don't know where the snare came from. And snare, again, there's the entailments of the metaphor that are interesting, because what's joyful about a snare is they don't just happen by accident. They're not like muddy fields. They didn't happen because of weather. A snare is a specific thing that's created in order to entrap. So the brain is very, very clever at these conversational metaphors. It pops them up and you go, when you ask clean questions, you're like, ooh, yeah, there's wisdom in this. That wasn't just a random word. There's something about the way I said that that's just right. So the micro connection that clean questions also get, which can be very, very interesting, is your connection to yourself and your ability to connect to others. So it doesn't cost a lot to ask one or two, but then it creates this sensation of, oh, that is what I'm like, or, oh, that's interesting, that's what they mean, or actually, I hadn't thought about it like this, but this is where my stuck comes from. So this is just a little micro connection. The opposite, I don't know what you would call that, but I call this a bit of drama, or where you're trying to help people too soon, you say that they're not good enough, or you hear it and it makes you feel bad. So this sort of stuff that stops you getting clean questions. So I think I'm going to pause for a bit and go, what questions or comments do you have just from what I've shared so far about this? So anything at all, and you can either, if you prefer to, you can write, but there's just enough of us that if you want to, you can just shout out, unmute yourselves and shout out.
No, Anne put a question in the chat from earlier. Don't know if that's still on your mind or if it's still connected to the idea.
Yes, and I don't think I really wrote it in a very clear way, but what I'm worried about is not listening in a way that I'm tagging on to the part that will be the best metaphor, the most important thing. I'm afraid of getting stuck on something that is a side note that won't make any difference. And I'm like, oh shit, we're down this rabbit hole and no one cares. So does that make sense from a strange
Absolutely. One of the things I talk about when I'm teaching is I talk about the target model. So it is one of the troubles is it might be clean, Anne, but you're still choosing. Of all the words that there were, you still choose which one to go down. And you'll obviously go down the one that your system thinks is interesting, which possibly isn't true for them. So the first thing I'd say is practice offline, don't practice live. Get used to the questions, not when it's important. Get used to the questions because you're trying to do so many things. You're trying to listen to them, choose your word, place a question next to it. And yeah, it's hard to also be clever. I mean, even I'm telling you about it, I'm a bit like this. So practice offline. The second thing is don't suffer from premature evaluation. So if you think you know, you're probably wrong. So the more sure you are, the more lazy your system is, the less you'll pay attention to their micro. I mean, you must have all seen this where somebody asks somebody a question and they might not say it, but the answer was no. and then the person presses ahead. And when you're not involved, you're like, I don't think they said yes. I don't think you answered their question, but they're not paying attention because they're pushing forward. So we use the target model. So if I take, Robert, are you okay if I ask about your snare in my target model?
Certainly.
Okay. So what have we got in the center of Robert's thing? Is it's stuck. So that's my term, but it's like in a snare. So that's what Robert started with. What kind of snare, Robert?
One of those vicious ones that you can't get out without damaging yourself.
So vicious. You won't be able to read this, so maybe Pascal, you were just doing some lovely writing. Would you just write that answer in the chat?
Sure, will do.
Cheeky, isn't it? But you could only say no. So vicious, and you'll damage yourself getting out.
Yep.
Now, I've got to make a choice. I can go back to finding out something else about the snare. I could say, does that snare have a size or a shape? I could say, what happened just before you were in the snare? What happens when you're in the snare? Then what happens? So I could go right back to the beginning, or I could go for the vicious, or I could go for the damage. So I've got to make a choice. And I have to know that if I go for the vicious or the damage, I'm one step away from what Robert agreed to share in a group. So I've got two things I'm having to track. That's what he first agreed, and my question took him to here. Now, if I ask him another question about the vicious, anything else about that vicious, I'm going to get to an orange answer. I will do that. Robert, what kind of vicious? So you'll damage yourself to get out. Is there anything else about that vicious?
It's cruel and it's intending to be cruel.
It's cruel and intending to be cruel. So, whoops, in a group setting, it is inappropriate for me to ask about the cruel now, because I have no idea, and Robert may well, if I ask the questions well enough and slick enough, may well then share data which I have led him to and not his. So this is not quite answering all your question, Anne, but it's that this tool has it's a safety tool. And I learned it. I didn't used to have all these tools. I used to just go and ask clean questions all the time. But in a startup, I asked somebody, if this organization was just the way, this startup was just the way you'd like it to be, it'd be like what? And he said, oh, it'll be safe. I said, oh, what kind of safe? He said, well defended. Oh, and when it's well defended, is there anything else when it's well defended? Well, it's a place that you can hide. Oh, when you hide, what kind of hide? Oh, like behind sandbags. When you hide behind sandbags, is there anything else about that? Yeah, then I feel safe. Oh, what kind of an eye is an eye like that? Oh, it reminds me of when I used to get bullied at boarding school. You were like, okay, see this? That was really, it was inappropriate. It was psychologically unsafe. It was me having a very, very powerful tool and having no idea what I was up to. I mean, this was 20 years ago. So, but I also just didn't know any better. I didn't realize, it is not your job to take people there with clean questions. It is simply your job to make micro connections, and the group will keep making them. What you're wanting is a highly attentive group, not suddenly trying to coach somebody about a word that they use. It's just not, that's not what this stuff's designed for. So, it's vicious, you can damage yourself, it's cruel, it's intending to be cruel. And that's Robert's. And who's different to that? Who's stuck in a different way in this group? And then you just move it. Robert knows a little bit, we know a little bit more about Robert's, that's it. We also know a little bit about Anne's, there's words tumbling out of that brain, but they're stuck and they're just tumbling. Now, we could ask the whole group could then go, oh, what happens just before we're stuck? Or what happens next? But you'll never know the right answer. Ask one or two and then go on to something else. That's the way with this. And here I did stuck because it's usually it's quite nice because it's either very visual or very kinesthetic. But you could use this. So, for example, if I do D, E, and I might say, hey, what's a prejudice that you used to have, but you don't have it anymore? And then everyone shares one prejudice that they used to have. And we might ask them one question about it. Everyone gets one question, very, very safe. And then I might ask, hey, what happened just before you lost your prejudice? And then we might ask two questions. Oh, anything else about that? What happened just before that? Now what you have with two clean questions, it's now three for everybody in the group, is a whole set of conditions under which this team updates prejudice that are homegrown, but you don't need to get too, oh, I've got to get the right question in the right place. It's what you're doing is going, hey, let's make the most of the answers people give us about things. Treat them with a little bit of safety, belonging, freedom, and then the group will start to have better, richer conversations with more micro connection and less microaggression, and you're not killing people's ideas when they start. That was a very long answer, Anne.
Well, it's a great answer.
Wayne's saying, what types of things break the micro connections? Well, you all think of, you can also answer this yourselves. When you're asking a question that's not really a question, how come you ask questions that aren't really questions? Under what circumstances do you do that?
Well, I usually do that when I think I already know the answer.
Yep. So when Wayne's just a little bit the smartest person in the room,
yes.
then yep. So I might do a new page. Yep. Who's got a different one? So you could do it because you already know the answer. When else might you do it?
When you're trying to get somebody to do something you want them to do.
Yep. So for a nice bit of manipulation.
Yeah.
Yep. When else? When else do you ask a question that is not a real connection?
When something triggers me.
What kind of triggers?
Makes me upset in some way.
Yeah. So one of the things to think about, and it follows a little bit like the safety, belonging, and freedom thing, is if you think about it as like three brains. So if Robert's upset or triggered in some way, then we can go into a bit of fight, a bit of flight, a bit of freeze, or a bit of fawn. And if you look at some of your reactions to stuck obviously, because of the nature of the metaphor, is often a freeze response. So it's hard to be genuinely curious when you're in your red brain, when you're in a brain that's concerned about your safety in this moment. It is very hard to be curious. It's good practice to get a bit overstimulated and then see if you can switch your brain into curiosity and creativity, but that's definitely one of them. If you think you're the smartest person in the room, then you've probably got a value in it. We think more the social brain. So Wayne, when you know the answer, what's the value that you're asking your dirty question for? What is it that's really important to you? When you know the answer, what are you doing that for?
Well, I think most of the time when that happens, it's more of the desire to look good. I want to let everybody know how smart I am. So you say something and I give you the answer because I'm the smartest. I want you to know that.
Yeah. So for some of us, and we all know who we are, being the clever one, being able to get the answer right, it's a social, gives us a sense of belonging, it gives us a sense of status in the group, it's a belonging behavior. And obviously it's fine, except when what we then do is make our room less smart because we're not paying attention to it in the right way. because nothing
It's
worse
more
than,
about me than about you. Yeah.
yeah, yep. I'm thinking about, again, I'll give you that other warning. I think I did give it to you, but just give it to you again. Don't teach this to your children. So if I come in and I say, hey, Guy, you're supposed to be doing your homework. Why are you on your phone? And my son says, do you want to ask me a question? Do you want to make assumptions? So that's the one where I want him to do his homework. But instead of asking, and I say, okay, Guy, what are you doing? I can see that you're on your phone. What are you doing? I'm doing my homework on my phone because it's the 21st century. So what's important to you? So the other reason is, if speed is important to us, if efficiency, if looking good, if we're frightened about something, if we think nobody's got the consequences of what's going on and we want to rescue the situation and save them all of these things, it is hard to ask a clean question if your social brain is triggered or your sense of safety is triggered. It's very hard. And one of the reasons why I think that clean questions are such an important tool is that they train the group to self-regulate. So if before I disagree with you or put you down or argue, if before I do that, I am forced to ask you 2 clean questions, it's very hard to stay fixated on what I've already presupposed is the right idea and ask you a clean question. It's hard to do those 2 things together. That's what's tricky about this. That's what's good about it. So it forces you, if you want to be more in creativity, and this is you at your best, to be creative, free thinking, freedom of thought, able to do everything the way you want to do it, then that state, clean questions, force you to be up towards the high end of the brain, to use more of the brain. Just looking at Eric's question. So Eric, tell us a bit about your validate my ability to empathize. That's a lovely one.
Yeah, sorry. And so it's actually funny because as I typed that and I sent it, I realized that's exactly what I just did. Um, so this happened recently, where someone was expressing, they were telling me a story, and it was something that I had to act on. And I also wanted to convey to them that I could understand or I could empathize what they were dealing with from just a story from my own past. And I was careful in the moment to express that I wasn't trying to diminish or take away from what they were sharing with me, because there was there's some gravity to that had to get addressed. And so I wanted to make sure that they knew that I wasn't just falling on ears that couldn't recognize the gravity of it. I think that's what I was trying to demonstrate to them without taking away from their experience, and wanting to acknowledge their experience is different. So I think that's the challenge, was just trying to make sure that I wasn't stealing from their story, um, by overlaying my own experience, but at the same time conveying to them that I could understand their their story a bit more
So
than someone without that experience.
if I was to make a little guess here about Eric, which obviously I could ask him questions, but if I was to make a guess, because you still have to make guesses before you ask your questions, he's spending quite a bit of time and thought in this belonging arena.
Right.
And one of the things in whether it's 2 people or groups of people is each of us has different amounts of this that we need.
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, they really don't need this. That thing that Eric's doing, some people will perceive that as, ew, like, I just told you some stuff. Get your stuff away from my stuff, because that's your stuff over there. And if you're high freedom, that sort of helpfulness, that kindness, that, empathic eyes, all of that stuff is really icky for people who don't need it. And then for people who do need it, people like me have to learn to put all of that stuff back in. Because, you know, you'll send me an email going blah, 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 and I'll go, what do I need to do with this? I need to do that. And I'm about to press send. I'm like, they will perceive this as I don't care about all this other stuff. And so then I have to go back through it and go put in feelings and care. Whereas to me, it's obvious that so I don't see why I should have to say it. So all I'm saying here, Eric, it's a complicated way of saying some people won't like it. They don't need it. Some people love it. And if you don't do it, they'll don't feel heard or cared about. And you've just got to calibrate. And what we say in this work is you've got to know your own preferences so that you don't overlay them on other people.
No, that's good advice. Yeah.
But if if you know you're one end of a spectrum, then you're like, oh, some people love where I am and they'll really like that, and others are going to hate it. I'm going to have to. And what we try to say in groups is, what's the smallest reasonable adjustment you have to make? Because being out of balance is exhausting. So if you constantly, and some of us find that we join a new team and we're like, oh, I have to wear a different coat in this group because they all want things from me. For me, I always worked with boys. So teenage boys who wouldn't go to school. So violent, doesn't hurt me, I love it. And then I had to work with girls who didn't go to school. And I was like, whoa, ooh, you want things from me. Like you want to know me, ooh. And if I didn't build a relationship with them, they wouldn't settle or trust me. And I don't mean all girls and boys like that. It's just that this was my first experience of working with this sex. And I was like, okay. And if I don't learn it, I can't work effectively. So it's like, what's the smallest I had to do to match? And then they would release me and then I could be more myself again. But I still had to match them just enough. So a clean stance, we have clean questions, but a clean stance is also going, I do not know the structure of your system. And I will calibrate and be interested rather than put you down because you don't make sense to me, or put myself down because I get it wrong. It's that this is being human is a calibration game, and we want to do just enough. Isn't not liking someone's ways of being sociable? Tell us what you mean, Blake.
So I think what I just heard you say was, well, people that are really into belonging, and like Eric's example is like, I want to empathize, and that some people won't like that. They think that's really ick if they have if they're like in a more, I think you said more of like a freedom brain, that'll feel really ick.
Well,
It'll be like rescuing.
They're not quite the same. To me, I know it can look, I'm struggling still with these models. It's more, sorry, let me put it like this. My sense of belonging, I'm not high relational. The way I know that you really know me and trust me, I still might, for this brain to be settled, I have to be able to say what I think without telling you all the feelingy, nonsensy stuff. So I feel really settled if we can just bypass all of that and just deal with what needs to be done. So I'm using these slightly differently, and it might at some point we might find better words for it, but it's some people, the relational stuff is really deeply important. And if they don't get it, this brain is unhappy. And for some people, freedom to act, freedom to work the way they want to work, not being micromanaged is so important. They really need it for this part of their brain to be happy. So it's like, it's not a correlation like that. It's that for these two brains to be happy so that you can be at your best, people need different amounts of this.
And the conditions that for different types of people, that mid-level, like the word that you said, preferences, that some people, belonging might be lower in their preferences or something.
Or they don't need very much of it for this brain to be.
Yeah. And they have different types of preferences that allow them to feel creative and free. Okay.
Yeah. And because I work with kids who don't go to school, I used to get that full range. So I'd get those full pathological, demand avoidant, friends on loose ends. Why would I want a relationship with anybody? People are unpredictable and stupid. You go, okay. And you just know that there's nothing there's no point in trying to appeal to that side of anything because that's just not the way that they are organized. Whereas others want to bring, they want to make you cupcakes and they want you to be pleased they made you cupcakes, even if you don't like stupid cupcakes. You've got to be pleased because it's their language it's going to settle them. Yeah.
And as you were talking about this, your chart there kind of put me in the mind of Maslow's hierarchy, and so safety and the fear response, core things in our brain. Other things built around that and on top of those things, because I thought I just heard that they're maybe not as connected as they were, as I imagined them to be.
So there's all sorts of things that I can't remember. Is it? It's not Wilbur who's writing about Maslow's hierarchy, but it's that it was taken out of context in many ways. And that for some communities, freedom is much, much more important than safety. That these things, it's not that you have to have this in order to have this in order to have this. It's that if in this moment your brain is in fight, flight, or freeze, it's probably focused and it's less likely to be able to do the other stuff. But what was just reading recently that study of the Icelandic teenagers. So Icelandic teenagers were some of the heaviest drinkers and smokers in the world. And then the government did a load of research and went, hang on a minute, what we're going to do is all teenagers are going to be offered arts programs. So sports programs, arts, dancing, drawing, sculpting. And in 20 years, they've managed to reduce it, like, I can't remember the figures, I don't want to make up figures, but dramatically. And so freedom, creativity, engaging in creative acts created such a strong sense of belonging in them that they started to behave in ways that were much safer in society. So I think it's a bit more, these are just ways of talking about things slightly differently than, and that different people have different ins to them. I think that's what we're trying to say with this. And in a team, what I'm always looking for is, in the clean work that we do, is could a 6-year-old understand what we're talking about? Could 56-year-olds understand what we're talking about? And does it just help us have a more generative conversation about what's happening here, rather than importing a model like Maslow's, which says we have to do this before we can do this? It's like, do we? There are definitely different categories of things, but actually, what is the best way for this team to operate?
Yeah, and I can see how they might be connected. It's also putting me in the mind of the pyramid, the dysfunction pyramid, where you have certain base things that you have to have in place before you can build more advanced and better concepts on top of. But it seems to me from what you're saying here that there may be somewhat of a hierarchy, but it's not linear, and the connections are looser than that, perhaps.
Yes, I mean, I think it's again similar in that I was very, very lucky that my first job happened to be with kids, because otherwise I don't think I would have learnt it as fast. Because so for example, I had children who couldn't read, but who'd memorized the Bible. Huge, huge tracts of it. Yes. And you go, you do not need to learn this in order to be able to appreciate that. And so there are lots of things, both in our school system, where things have been divided into measurable chunks, but actually that's not the way the brain works, and it's not the way that groups have to work. And so with clean questions, what we tend to do is if there's a problem, we can model out the problem and get the structure as it is, and then model out what we'd really like to have happen, and then be very creative about what we need to do to get there. Pascal, you're saying that you have it like a pie chart.
Yeah. Where my need is kind of expressed in how big the chunks are. And then at any given moment, my attention will be on one or more of these parts. But to be really at my best, at least my attention wouldn't be stuck in like safety or belonging. I might still take it into account. It might still be a relevant thing, but I can move freely between these three things.
Yeah. But you'll know that there are some people where freedom is so important, it doesn't matter if they can't feed themselves or house themselves. They have to do what they're doing, regardless. It's just what they have to do. And there's others I know about, it doesn't matter how miserable they are at work and how much they hate it and hate their boss. If it's security and there's going to be a pension at the end of it, they'll stay. And there's others who could not tolerate that. And so it's just noticing what's your need. Don't go to university because you love that lecturer, unless you make sure that lecturer is still going to be there for the 3 years you're going to be at university. Because if you went for that relationship rather than the subject or the institution, you're precarious, you're in a fragile state. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Or 3 minutes even. Is there any other questions or comments people are thinking about just as we're talking about these concepts?
There's all kinds of things popping into my brain, but we don't have time to talk about them.
Well, luckily we're gonna come and play in Toronto, so we're gonna have some time together to play with these.
Yes. And just on that, Caitlin, I wanted to share an announcement here that Caitlin will be coming to Toronto in February. So we're going to try to do a Clean in Toronto session, 2 days, February 24th and 25th. And if you love this kind of stuff, there's going to be a whole lot more of that, and we'll build on that. And we'll be doing some introduction to Clean and also some Clean for teams. So if you're a manager or a leader of some sort, or a coach, a team lead, then how can you use these practices in your team, in your organization, to really help people communicate better? There's also, I believe, a certification that we can get if you're interested in that. But yeah, stay tuned for more details. We don't have the sign up quite ready yet, so we wanted to make this sort of the announcement for your course, Caitlin, and then we'll stay tuned for details coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to tell us anything more about what you're planning on doing in Toronto?
Well, I think what's really important, what I'm really looking forward to in Toronto is you've got to be able to take the bits away and play with them. So you want to, it's not complicated. It isn't much more than that, but playing with them, seeing the interplay with them, going, okay, how would I have to translate this if I wanted to use it, with a group of developers on how they work with customer user experience? Or so you want to keep the chunks small enough so that you can immediately go away and play with them, not know about it, think about it, forget about it, keep a book and put it on the shelf. So what I'm looking for in Toronto is something that's very practical and usable. That's what I'm up for there.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be my first time in Canada. And so the other thing I'm really looking for from other people is, if you know of people in Canada, that while we're there, is there anyone do you think that might be interested in Clean? So I'm really hoping for a bit of networking as well. So a bit of a chance to go, okay, who else is thinking about stuff like this? Who might be interested? Does anyone know of anything and think, oh, do you know what? That sounds a bit like this. So really utilizing the natural networks to go, who could we be playing with together?
So yeah, we're going to spread the word. We're going to try to get this out there and see who's interested. We've put, Caitlin, we've put your contact information here. That's your website. This today was hosted by Zodiac. We're Toronto-based consultant or company, and that's our contact information there. You can find us on LinkedIn primarily, and all the other channels as well. And I think today Pascal and Umar have joined us too. We wanted to kind of plug their workshop that's coming up. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that as we finish off today?
Yeah, I can say a little bit about it. It kind of ties into this quite nicely because all of these nice, clean questions, similar how the target model is like a safety tool. We're going to talk about contracting and how having a contract to do any of this stuff is quite often needed, and actually how quite frequently we use contracts in any conversation that we have. So from a start better conversations perspective, we'll be talking about how do contracts work, how do we create them, even on the fly, and how do they tie in with things like safety, belonging, and freedom.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's great because that's what we say to people. Unless you have a formal contract, one or two clean questions is absolutely as much because you don't have the contract to go rummaging around in other people's stuff. And then similarly, of course, with kids, unless you're invited to, we're terrible for rummaging around and trying to manipulate them. And they're very good at wriggling out if they haven't. You're much better off to work out what's the contract between you and establish that than to go and get from invitations, an invitational based approach to all of this.
Yeah.
It does make you better at manipulating if that's your bent, if you want to go take these tools to the dark side. But hopefully they'll give you the confidence that things can be done well and straightforwardly.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sounds a little bit like a coaching contract, but yeah. Anyway, that's fantastic. So that's coming up in 2 weeks or so on the 5th of November. There's a link for that. I believe that's free. So yeah, if you're interested, please join up. And yeah, please keep us in mind for Clean in Toronto coming up in February. Caitlin, you're brave. Canada for the first time in February. Boy,
I like it cold.
Yep. So stay tuned. We're going to have a couple of more webinars coming in the next month or two, and we're going to dive into a couple of more concepts here to introduce what this Clean in Toronto is going to be about. So thank you very much, Caitlin, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks for sharing your stuck metaphors. They were brilliant.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, thanks everybody, and we will hopefully see you next time.